I'm Rebekah. I'm the SOAR Projects Coordinator with the Nature Conservancy. And in 2024, the SOAR program awarded 47 projects out to growers to help increase resiliency in the industry, focusing on workforce development, developing efficiencies on the farm, and engaging growers in restoration. I'm going to keep it quick. You're here to learn about these projects, and they're not 5-minute tech talks, but they're going to go pretty quick. So I will pass it on.
Red, thank you. All right, hi everyone, I'm Jen Sagan. I'm the oyster restoration specialist with Friends of the Rappahannock, and this is just a real quick overview of our SOAR program funded by the Nature Conservancy. Friends of the Rappahannock is an environmental nonprofit dedicated to the health of the Rappahannock River, which is the longest free-flowing river in the Chesapeake Bay region, so I'm working up in Virginia. And in 2025, it was actually designated as one of America's most endangered rivers. The Mississippi is actually #1, we are #6. We use a combination of advocacy, restoration, and education to improve the health of the Rappahannock River throughout the entire watershed. We always say from the Blue Ridge Mountains to the Chesapeake Bay, with the help of our wonderful partners. For this project, we had 4 core partners. Oyster Catcher Sea Farms and Rogue Oysters are 2 small oyster farming operations on the Rappahannock. The Rappahannock tribe is a tribal nation working on an initiative that they have named their Return to the River. So they are reclaiming tribal lands and historical practices and helping to restore the Rappahannock watershed. And of course, Friends of the Rappahannock, we were the applicant. Our job was to coordinate with our partners and to install the oysters onto our reef restoration sites. So during this project, Oyster Catcher Sea Farms at the bottom there raised 250,000 diploid seed oysters in a floating upweller system, and they were actually able to donate an additional 44,000 wild-caught spat-on shell. Those were in derelict cages that he wasn't maintaining any longer, so those oysters were ones that he wouldn't have been able to sell anyway. Rogue Oysters at the top grew 200 diploid seed oysters for us and significantly contributed to the Rappahannock Tribes Initiative. They provided the hands-on oyster aquaculture training to tribal staff and made a very generous donation of a 72-acre oyster lease to be transferred into the tribe's name. So that lease was a perfect clean slate for the tribe to kick off their oyster programs. It's firm, sandy substrate in the main stem of the Rappahannock, and it's really easily accessible from a neighboring state park, who is another partner very excited about this. So that work with the tribe was a huge success of this project. It really allowed the Rappahannock tribe to begin this reclamation of a portion of the river and of a valuable historical practice. So because of that, now they're able to help restore Rappahannock ecosystems and grow their own line of oysters, both for consumption and hopefully in the near future for sale as well. And again, they're just preserving that really valuable tradition. So overall, all 4 partners benefited from strengthening relationships in the Rappahannock watershed. Rogue Oysters and Oyster Catcher Sea Farms had that guaranteed income for seed production, and Oyster Catcher Sea Farms had that added benefit of profiting off of oysters he wouldn't have been able to sell otherwise. Rogue contributed the lease and the training to the Rappahannock tribe, so that helped them kick off their new oyster program, and the tribe was able to grow seed oysters for the first time in a long time. And of course, Friends of the Rappahannock, we were able to have more diploids in the water for restoration projects, and we're able to support our local aquaculture partners. A struggle across the board was staffing. All of these groups had 1, maybe 2 people dedicated to this project. So I think it was a really delicate balance of if this was just one more thing on their plate in their already very busy day-to-day lives, or if it was some really welcomed income to help keep their practices going. That's all for me. This was a really awesome project. Thank you so much, and I hope you all had a great time at Oyster South.
Finally happened, and we're getting a chance to go for it. I think before I start now with my slides and stuff, I wanted to share some of the comments and stuff I've learned since I've been here for 3 days now and talking to the different farmers and everything. And one of the things that really strikes out to me is that how we're in a different region growing a different species, but every issue is similar to my region. Farming practices is similar. The issues we encounter with regulators or environmental issues are all similar. So I think that's been probably the most striking thing that I've learned here. Another thing that was really maybe almost kind of like, I'd say almost shocking to me was, and confusing, was talking about aquaculture and fishing. And in my region, we've been growing oysters for a long time, just like in other parts of the United States, but a lot of the area is done with traditional bottom culture oysters. And that's kind of what I'm gonna talk about today, but we do other types of aquaculture. But it's very important for my farmers to identify as aquaculture farmers. And so even if they're doing spat on shell or wild set, they consider themselves farmers. And that was definitely a kind of a culture shock for me to experience that. So the project, I'm David Beugli. I'm the executive director of the Willapa Grace Harbor Oyster Growers Association. I've been there for about 8, 10, 11, 12 years, something like that, when Jesse started at that time. And been involved in a lot of different projects, and this is one of them that I had to learn on my own because I didn't know anything about recycling plastic at all. So the project's called A New Look at Recycling Culch Bags, and it's a pilot study. And I think the first thing that's important is what are culch bags, how are they made, and how are they used? So the culch bags that we're using are clean oyster shell placed in those nylon or plastic mesh bags that are really common for putting product in. There's a knot tied on each end. The shell has been washed beforehand. The farmers have crews that make those bags every year on the off time, and they sit and overwinter those clean shells, and then when they need to make their seed, they take the upland tanks with hot water, heated water in it, and they introduce the spat to these tanks that have these culch bags in it, and that's how they start what they call their seed. And this came about because in the early 2000s, a large number of farmers were really focused on natural set and catching that natural seed. But when we started experiencing ocean acidification, that was not something that would be reliable enough anymore to run a business. The larger companies had already moved to this direction with the using the nurseries and the upland setting stations, but the smaller farmers didn't really start getting into it until the early 2000s, 10, 11, 12, around there. So that's what they're used for and how they're made. And then we're going to get into kind of like the problem with it. So what you're seeing in the picture here before I move on is that this is a couple acres of tide flats over near my office. And you can see that they're actually overwintering these seed or spat on shell. They're overwintering them on pallets, so they're stacking them about 4 or 5 bags high and layer and layer. And they'll overwinter there. Depending on the size of the company, they could stay there for 12 months or they could stay there for 4 months. Just depends on the farm plan. Okay, so I gotta figure out how to do the slides. So. Okay, I should go faster. Green button is the biggest one. Yeah, so I'm the red-green colorblind guy. Okay, I'll go faster. So the culch bags are considered a one-time use product. Depending on the farm size, they make 30 to 150,000 bags a year. In our region, we generate 600,000 bags yearly. And for the people that are looking at production kind of numbers like that, 600,000 culch bags, depending on where you plant them at, could in 3 years from meat oyster be 3 to 5 bushels per culch bag. So obviously they grow at time. Also depends on how much larvae you have set on the culch. Typically these bags are loosely stacked and piled into dumpsters and make their way to landfills when they're done at one-time use. So depending on the size of the company, the landfill costs for $400,000 to $10,000 a year. So, and then if you look at this picture here, this is my initial attempt in 2020, around COVID sometime, working with PCSGA to do a recycling project. So PCSGA has a bigger growers association, so they offered to get the trucking company together. I got the farmers together, put the bags in to do a recycling run, and we found out that when they're loosely bundled like that, you can't put a lot of bags in a truck. So that turned out to be a kind of a failure. So the solution was the SOAR grant. And so in 2024, my association successfully received a SOAR grant, and that kicked things off at looking at a new way to do the recycling. So we hosted a tour with a plastics recycling broker, which I never even knew existed at that time. And that brought them down. We showed them how we use the products, what the issue was, and then the next steps were that. And what the next steps turned out to be is we had to figure out what they were made out of. So we contacted the manufacturer, got the MSDS sheets. They figured out what the composition was and who they could recycle that with. And then the next step was we purchased the baling machine with the funds. Let me see if I can get there. So then we purchased the baling machine with the funds, and that was set up on a centralized location where all the farmers could use that machinery on their own time and create bales that would be eventually used for the trucking and recycling. So you can see a picture of the machine. You can see one farmer has a truck that lines up with the deck perfectly, so he can have one employee making the bales. And then that's a finished bale on the forklift there. Am I still doing good? Okay. So the lessons learned, these are kind of things that kind of make sense. We're getting better at making the bales. Red button, the little red one that I can barely see. Okay, so lessons learned, the crews are gonna make about a bale an hour, so maybe one company would take them 6 hours to bale their bags for the year. The bales take up a lot less space, and that helps with the trucking frequency and saves money right there. Biofouling is a major issue on the value of your recycled product. And then all farmers already know this, everything takes more time and requires longer than anticipated. It took a while to get the equipment here, it took a while to get the electrician there, it took a while to get it set up. The recycling companies are few and far between. The initial failed attempt you saw there in 2020 was the closest recycling company, and we didn't do our due diligence, and that company actually was gonna burn that as a fuel, which is not the story we wanted to tell. So we have found other companies that are able to make pellets and reuse products like that. So in the future, we're hoping to get more companies involved and participating, and we want to work with a manufacturer that can create pellets that we can send back to the OEM and kind of create the whole circle of renew and reuse. All right.
All right. Okay, I know I am basically out of time, so I'm going to be super quick. I'm going to use this time instead to just really highlight this project in Florida was a hugely collaborative project between FSU CML, Sandra Brook and I led the restoration team, and our aquaculture partners. They have been instrumental since the beginning of this program. We bugged them to death at the beginning, asking them about every tiny little decision, and we really just tried to listen to them and incorporate that into a mutually beneficial partnership in restoration. So I don't want to take up too much time because we got to learn. So we did a bunch. If you want to hear more about it, come find me with a drink in your hand. But we did what I feel is start building a really mutually beneficial partnership between us and the aquaculture industry in this area in Florida. And I got to play with drones, and that was really fun. So benefits to the industry, an expanded program would lead to alternative income streams in Florida for Florida farmers, which we think is really important. We have created more steps towards increasing positive impacts of oyster farming, which is inherent in oyster farming, and we know that, and we recognize this. This would just be another one. And then also building community ties with the local community. The community and all the outreach I did for this project were really impressed with what the farmers were doing. And so I hope it just increased their regard for our oyster farmers in our area. And then obviously this is a partnership, benefits to restoration. It was a great source of material that had natural wild recruitment and natural biofilms to help kickstart depleted intertidal areas in the area we were focused on. And paying oyster farmers in these specific areas might be more cost efficient than having to ship in really heavy limestone or granite or oyster shell. It's actually really expensive to get your hands on and to get to your locations. And so just another alternative material stream. So just benefits all around. Thank you.
And I know no questions, but I also just wanted to highlight there are other Resiliency Fund awardees in the audience, so I hope you all get a chance to connect and talk about their projects as well. Thank you.